Dan Dickau for the Bulldog broadcast in the Field of 68 Media Network. A quick recap on Gonzaga's first regular season game of the year against Dixie State, and a little bit of a preview against the big-time matchup against Texas. Gonzaga, as anybody who's listening to this knows, number one in both the coaches and the AP poll. First time they've ever started the season number one in both polls. They've been in the AP, but never in the coaches poll to start the season. Texas, number 5, currently in both polls. That game Saturday night is going to be a huge look into where both of these teams are early in this season with so many new faces. Texas, a number of transfers. You go down the list. Marcus Carr was a great scorer at Minnesota a season ago. Timmy Allen did everything at Utah. Devin Askew, a great shooter, transferred from Kentucky where he really never found his way. Trey Mitchell had a couple really good years at Massachusetts, a very versatile scorer. Christian Bishop kind of did all the little things for Creighton over the last couple of years. I'm sure I'm missing somebody in their transfer world, but they look to be extremely good and talented under Chris Beard. Chris Beard has had success against Gonzaga in the past. You look back a couple of years in the NCAA tournament when Gonzaga had Rui, Corey Kispert, Brandon Clark, Petrushev. They really gave fits to Gonzaga on the offensive end of the floor, and a lot of it's because of how unique they are defensively. They are one of the best defensive teams that I can remember in recent years, and they don't do it every single possession, at least from what I know and what I've watched. But there are times that defensively they will not let the ball get to the middle whatsoever. Well, every great coach has a philosophy on both ends of the floor. But defensively, many coaches will preach, keep the ball out of the paint, influence sideline, influence baseline. Well, Texas takes it a step further, and they are absolutely pushing everything to the corner. Where in a typical defense, you'll be, say if the ball's on the wing and you're influencing corner, say there's a reversal pass to go to the top of the key. Instead of being like on the line, up the line, discouraging it, but if it's an opportunity, the ball will get reversed. They will be completely in that passing lane, sometimes with their back to the guy that they're guarding, where literally they're in the gaps defensively, where even if they start to get back middle, that secondary defender is in the gap in that passing lane, ready to shut it off, and then the secondary help, so the guy 2 passes removed is already in the middle of the key, where really you have no opportunities to drive and get middle. I don't know if I'm doing justice describing it, but the breakdowns that you can see on a number of different websites do a really good job of sharing it. But the biggest focal point for Texas, I think, defensively, and now you've only got a small sample size in one game, is they're going to try to make life difficult for Gonzaga on the offensive end of the floor. And they do that by keeping the ball on one side of the floor, not allowing you to get middle. Because when the ball gets middle, you break the defense down, you put the defense in rotation, and things open up for the offense. Now, on the flip side for Gonzaga on the offensive end, they've been so good over the last however many years because they may be the best team in the country at getting the ball from side to side. They run their continuity ball screen offense, and that ball will switch sides 3 or 4 times in a matter of 10 to 12 seconds because they're so unselfish. They understand spacing, they understand cutting angles, they understand screening angles, and they're willing to make the correct play and the right pass at the right time to free up a teammate or to get a teammate a shot. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest things to keep an eye out for. Is Gonzaga able to move Texas's defense, get the ball side to side, and get them to break down a little bit? I think the glass is always going to be a key when you go against a Big 12 team. Texas doesn't have the size maybe that you would think of with a Big 12 team. I say that with they don't have the size of being, maybe a 7-foot, 240 post in there where they can maybe rotate a couple of those guys in. But they do have great size on the wings and on the perimeter, where they've got 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", long, rangy athletes. So that's where I think the size comes in. Texas had an easier opening game win than Gonzaga. They beat Houston Baptist 92-48, six Longhorns were in double figures. So they've got a lot of guys that can spread it and share it, and make plays for each other, and are willing to make plays for each other. So I think when it comes down to it, the biggest things for Gonzaga to have success is don't turn it over, because they had 15 turnovers in their opener against Dixie State, but don't turn it over because of the pressure that Texas is going to put on you, influencing you sideline, baseline, corner. Just get that ball to correct angles, get that ball to correct spacing, and try to get that ball moving side to side, and then punch gaps when opportunities presents itself. I think they got to finish at the rim. I don't think Gonzaga's finished great at the rim, both in the 2 exhibition games as well as in the game against Dixie State. I think they missed a few more shots on the interior than they're used to, and maybe that the staff would like. But that's an easy fix. I mean, you look at Holmgren, Timmy, Watson, Caden Perry, Ben Gregg. Those guys are solid. Those guys are terrific players. It's not going to be an issue for long, but unfortunately it has been the first 3 games of the year. And I think they've got to hit enough threes to keep Texas honest, to guard them at the 3-point line and not pack it in quite so much. I think that might be one of the adjustments Texas makes, is try to make them score from the 3-point line. Rasir Bolton, 3 of 4 from beyond the arc in the opener, but other than that, nobody was multiple threes, at least from what I remember. But I think that's going to be a recurring theme throughout this season. I think Gonzaga has a lot of really good shooters, but they don't have a true knockdown shooter like they had a season ago in Corey Kispert. But when you look now at Gonzaga's first game, regular season opener, Coach Few obviously wasn't there. I think Brian Michelson showed his poise as a head coach. It's fun to watch him because he's a friend of mine. I think, when you look at Coach Greer heading off, you look at Coach Rice heading off, Coach Giacoletti getting his opportunity, Tommy Lloyd, it is only a matter of time for Brian Michelson. And I say this with a ton of respect and knowing him that he's going to be tremendous whenever he's ready or feels it's time to be a head coach somewhere other than Gonzaga. Maybe it is Gonzaga in years from now when Coach Few may say he's done. But I thought it was really fun to see him in that role. I thought he did a good job. And I think, one of the other things that is great about this, the way Gonzaga runs their practices, if you get a chance to ever go, is Coach Few gives his staff a lot of teaching responsibilities. And so, Brian's ability to coach those guys in practice and then translate it into the game was really fun to see. I mean, those guys coach them up in inter squad scrimmages all the time. So Brian was prepared. He was ready for the moment. I thought it was funny, though, to watch kind of his demeanor on the sidelines. He looked like a head coach. He looked like he was ready. And so, again, it was a lot of fun for me to see that. But, when you look at the Dixie State game overall, I thought it was great. 97-63 win. They got off to a great start due to their defense. And then they had a few lulls on the offensive end of the floor, with too many turnovers. You got to give Dixie State a lot of credit. They hung in there. I think they closed the gap to about 12 points or so, maybe with about 14 minutes left, 12 minutes left, something like that. But it was a chance for Gonzaga to feel a little bit of adversity at home. I think that was better for them than cruising to, a 50-point home win against a Division I opponent in their opener, much like the 2 exhibition games they had. So I thought having a little bit of adversity was good, so that they could take some film and break it down and improve upon it. But when you look at some individual performances, I mean, Chet Holmgren, it's only a matter of time before we see a triple-double from him. We may even see a quadruple-double from him because he's just stuffs every imaginable stat on the box score that you can imagine. Drew Timme, he was solid. Nothing jumped out of the page, 11 points, 4 rebounds, but he dealt with some foul troubles. But that's not going to be the case throughout much of the year. Anton Watson, I thought, was a great spark for Gonzaga. His experience and his versatility is really going to show. Bolton, he had a great first opener. He just took what the defense gave him. There was one pick and roll, defender went under, he stopped behind, hit the 3. Another dribble handoff action, defender went under, he stopped behind, got the hand back, hit the 3. So you could see the experience on those type of reads that are going to be important for Gonzaga. I thought Hickman had some nice moments. 11 points in his opener. Salas played really good in the first two exhibitions. He didn't score the way that he did in those two in the opener, but I'm really high on him. And then Julian Strother struggled in the first half, really came alive in that second half, getting out, pressuring the ball, getting in passing lanes, getting out, scoring in transition. So all in all, a great opener. But this is a big week for Gonzaga. As mentioned, play number 5 Texas. This is a chance to really kind of see where some of these young guys are at, because Gonzaga's got a lot of new faces. Texas has a lot of new faces. The difference with Texas's new faces, they've got experience at the college level. Gonzaga's got to get that experience at the Division I level. So all in all, looking forward to it. I think Gonzaga fans are going to learn a lot over the next 24 to 48 hours of individual strengths and weaknesses, as well as team strengths and weaknesses, and we're going to be able to start seeing where things can really improve, because that's the beauty of this year's Gonzaga team. As good as they are now, the room for growth is going to be fun to watch.
Before we move on to the next topic, let me tell you guys a little bit about our partners over at Bet Rivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up with Bet Rivers yet, now's the time, because they are offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart is that they require just one playthrough to turn your bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawing your winnings is safer, more secure, and more reliable. With basketball season tipping off, get in on the action by going to betrivers.com today or by downloading the BetRivers iOS app. Must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Today's Bulldog broadcast with myself, your host, Dan Dickau, for the Field of 68 Media Network is one I think listeners are going to enjoy. 3 names that need to be synonymous with the start of Gonzaga's prowess. Hard to believe it was the early to mid-90s that this trio played with a number of other really good players to get Gonzaga started on the right track. Point guard Geoff Goss, terrific shooter Jarrid Davis, and the first of many transfers from the University of Washington, Jeff Brown. Fellas, I appreciate you guys joining me. Let's start with Geoff Goss. Jeff, you have a reputation from a lot of former players as kind of being the first point guard who really had a lot of talent, but you didn't always put things together. I'm going to give Jeff and Jarrid a chance to answer that one in a minute about your game, but tell us a little bit about your struggles early as a point guard at Gonzaga.
How long's your show? I think it started with Fitz saying he didn't know whether to put a catcher's mask on when I was playing. So that was always a good one to start with as a point guard from a confidence level. But, there was a lot, just coming from a small town and being, pretty inexperienced, but then also kind of building with the guys that are on the screen were very, very helpful. But there were a lot of struggles early, just as being a point guard, just trying to learn the game and learn the system and play at a different level.
Yeah, Gonzaga has always put a lot of responsibility on point guard's shoulders, and we'll touch on Fitzgerald, Coach Fitz, later on, because I think he doesn't get enough credit for being kind of the foundational piece to the program. But Jarrid, you were a little older than these guys. You had to kind of set the tone for the culture that was being built at Gonzaga. What was that like? And then when you look at Gonzaga's culture now, have you seen it carry through?
I think early on, Dan, it was, Eric Brady and I were the same age. So Brady was actually a transfer from the University of Washington. We were kind of the 2 seniors. He had to sit out as well. So I think our redshirt class was really the class. It was Few's first year, Dan Munson, Billy Greer. So it was me, Eric Brady, Scott Spink, Geoff Goss, Matt Stanford. That was the first group that I think started to kind of change it culturally. And I think it was influenced by Mark, that mediocrity really wasn't the goal, that everyone wanted to, see if we could do bigger and better things. And frankly, all of us were, other than Brady, were sort of not kind of underdogs, if you would. for the most part. And I think now Mark always had a chip on his shoulder. He's like, why are we playing, and nothing against them, but why are we playing Eastern Oregon? Let's go play guys that, we'll challenge them if it's got to be a neutral court. Took them a while to get Fitz to come around.
Jeff Brown, you started your career similar as myself at the University of Washington. You came back because you grew up in the Spokane area. You came back and had a dominant career at Gonzaga. What was it about needing to come back to Spokane and Gonzaga, and then the ability to have success that was special for you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dan. First I always say, when people ask me, was I disappointed that I spent a year over in Seattle? And I'm not. And the reason I'm not is it gave me great perspective and appreciation of just the difference, as you well know, in programs and cultures. And I would agree with Jarrid and Goss that, the bedrock of that was that redshirt class, if you will. And I would need to give Jarrid credit. He and I also played together at Meade High School, and he was 2 years older than I was, and he was adamant that this redshirt crew, along with Jamie Dudley, who was playing as a freshman, really were a special group. And so transferring back to Spokane to Gonzaga was easy. Growing up here, watching Fitz on the sidelines, I'd sit there and watch him and go, he during the game looks like Bobby Knight. I'm not sure that's the guy I want to go play with. And I will share with you that practices with Fitz were in a classroom, right? He really taught. Now, games may be something different. He would lose his mind and he got caught up in the game. But Gonzaga is just a special place. And it was, great to be able to, get the program going the right way, recruit the right guys. And, 30 years later, we are taking our wives and our teammates together on trips together. And I think that speaks very well of the friendships that were established way back in the day.
You guys all seem to have fond memories of Fitz, and Coach Few, I know, has taken a lot of things from Fitz and kind of molded them into his coaching philosophy and his concepts. But when you look at Fitz, what was the most special thing about him? We can start with you, Jarrid.
I agree with Jeff. Look, Fitz was a real student of the game. I mean, he was kind of nuts. Like when the lights came on, I remember, the jump ball would go up, and if we lost the tip, he'd look down the bench at Few and Muntz and throw the towel and say, "That's it, ball game." Like he just sort of lost his mind. But in practice, he really knew a lot about the game, and he really taught it in practice. And I think, look, he was a loyal guy. He really, in his own way, wanted the best for each of his players. He went about it differently. He would hug and kiss Brown and scream at me. So he had a little bit different with each guy. But that was the really special part of Fitz.
Geoff Goss, I know, a lot of times people say the point guard is a coach on the floor. You didn't get into coaching. Did you ever have any thoughts of getting into coaching, or did being around Fitz and seeing, Coach Few in the early years of being an assistant kind of dissuade you from going down that path?
No, I think we actually just were talking about this last weekend. I think we all had, at least for a bit of time, the thought of going into coaching. And I know I did, and I especially did coming back overseas. But I think it would have been fun to coach with Fitz, because with the exception of the late night film sessions, but he was definitely, like Jarrid was just saying, he's one of those guys that you learn so much from in practice, and then hopefully it would carry over into the games, which a lot of times it did. But with him especially, he was just a pretty special guy to learn from. Maybe not all the time, but definitely during practice, because he was, I felt, way ahead of a lot of his peers during that time.
Brown, you were, I believe, WCC Player of the Year twice. Am I right with that?
Just once, Danny.
Just once. Okay, so you were I think the first Gonzaga player to win that award. Is there a game or a matchup that you remember from your time in the WCC that you might come across in memories and think fondly of it?
Certainly plenty of them. There'll be a handful, if I might. The first one was, I was the ability to go to Santa Clara, which is where Fitz was the assistant. And I remember the first time we got him a win on the road, playing against his protege, Coach Williams, Carroll Williams, was certainly a key game. Personally, the first time that we went to the postseason at Gonzaga was the NIT. We played Stanford, and coming out of high school, Stanford was certainly a school that I wanted to go to, or was certainly on the short list. And then the last one was, probably the one of most heartache, which was as a senior, we won the WCC by 4 games. Clearly the best team, but we got upset in the WCC league tournament. And I distinctly remember getting called my second foul in the first half, and then I sat there as a great spectator on the bench for the next 12 minutes. And I was a hot mess that game. But, if I could go back and hit the rewind button for that game to get Gonzaga into the tournament for the first time ever, would be a game that I would love to go replay. But that's the beauty of sports, is that thrill of accomplishment after, so much hard work, as well as the disappointment. And that game against San Diego, my senior year, Goss's senior year, was certainly one of disappointment.
Brown, a lot of guys that are lockdown defenders like you are a hot mess on the bench. So that's why you got those 2 fouls.
Yeah, I was going to say, why wouldn't you bring up the Fresno State game when you locked down Will Hooker? I mean, what about that?
I guess I made the mistake.
Get a hand up.
I guess I made the mistake of actually trying to defend for a possession and got bringed up for a bad foul. Dan, you can appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I learned from Coach Few, and Goss, you probably couldn't relate to this, but I'm sure Jeff Brown can, is if you're scoring more points than your opponent, you can just give it a lay defense on occasion, right?
That's giving Brown a lot of credit that he even has the word defense in his vernacular. It doesn't work that way with him.
He didn't even know where that was.
I know. He's like, what end of the court is that again?
So, Jeff, did your time match up with Steve Nash at Santa Clara? I think if I'm right, you would have matched up against him a little bit. Am I right?
Yeah, we played against him for 2 years. So my junior and senior year when he was a freshman and sophomore. So
how was that? Because I remember the stories of being told from Beej and Coach Few that you were a terrific defender. You weren't afraid to climb up into guys. But Steve Nash, even at a young age, was a different level ball handler, creative wise.
Yeah, we always thought he was, really, really good. I never expected he would be where he is today, but he was very, very difficult to guard. Very fun guy off the court as well, which was nice. But candidly, the guys that were harder on that team one was John Woolery, the left-handed point guard, who's another all-league guy. But the toughest guy was Orlando Smart from USF. I mean, he was the hardest guy I've ever had to guard. He led the nation in assists, I think, 3 of our 4 years together. But Nash was a guy that just got better. I don't know. I don't know about Brown, but we always had a problem with him. But he was never that guy that was overly concerned about that he was going to kill us. So,
Jarrid, I look at you as being one of the first Gonzaga guys that fits the mold, kind of like a Corey Kispert, where Richie Fromm, big wing that could shoot it. Do you see yourself as being that early prototype wing for Gonzaga?
I mean, certainly my role, Dan, was shooting, right? But I didn't quite rise to the athleticism of the Kisperts and Fromms. But look, Few doesn't always agree with this, and Gonzaga's obviously taken this to a totally different level than when the 3 of us played. But the West Coast Conference, when we played, was good. I mean, Doug Christie was my big nemesis, and Doug was a 16-year NBA player. There were really, really good players in the West Coast Conference. Nash, you mentioned, was coming in the league. I mean, the Loyola teams. It was hard to sit out. The whole reason I went to Gonzaga is I was such a late bloomer. I had to go to junior college, and there were times Goss and I's redshirt year, Fitz wanted to pull me off the redshirt because I think they were 8-20. And I didn't. It's the whole reason I went to Gonzaga is I knew I was a late bloomer. I mean, I grew 5 inches in college. So if that was the prototype, I think it was certainly the start, but it certainly helped when we got Brown and when Brown was eligible, because actually my average went down a little bit, but we were a much better team because all of a sudden we had someone that was such a scoring threat down low. No defense, but he could really score.
There's always an evolution to a player-coach relationship, both when you're playing, getting done, different roles that you kind of have over the course of your life. But with Coach Few going from assistant coach to head coach and now future Hall of Famer, Jeff Brown, I want to start with you first because you played, then you were a broadcaster for a couple years, so you got to talk to him in that sense. And now, all these years later, I know you run into him on different occasions. What has your relationship been like with Coach Few, and what are some maybe a big surprise that people wouldn't know about him?
No, that's an awesome question. So, he was such a young assistant when we played. And at the time, Coach Munson was, the bigs coach. Few would take the guards. And give Fitz credit for, taking a shot on, at the time, very young high school coaches. And that had a huge impact on the program. All the things obviously brought from an energy and perspective level. And I think your word of evolution as far as a relationship with players is spot on. When I got done, Mark and I spent a ton of time either in the golf course or fly fishing together when I was playing overseas and became extraordinarily tight. I'd like to say that at the time he and I were kind of fly fishing together, and I think he's probably spent probably 1 million hours more in the last decade on the river than I have, but just a good person. It starts with that. Would I allow my boys to go play for Coach Few? In a second, as far as just being good people. And, there's a handful of things, what college isn't trying to figure out how to unlock the Gonzaga? I think all of us probably get asked that all the time, like, what's the secret? And he clearly is a, massive role in that. And, not only is he going to be on the Hall of Fame, but arguably on the Mount Rushmore of the greatest college basketball coaches of all time, especially if he's able to go win a national championship. So from where we were, 8-20 in the early 90s, he's talking about, is this the year they're going to win the national championship? No one would have looked at Gonzaga at that point and said, that's probably a likely Cinderella story coming out of there. So I think we all, obviously that story is well told. But what I appreciate about Mark is he hasn't changed. He's still the guy that you can, go fly fish with, play golf with. He's a family guy. And at the end of the day, just a really good person.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the only, and I don't even say this is a negative interaction with Coach Few, but one of the first years I was in broadcasting, I had to call a game. It was Gonzaga at Santa Clara. And you guys have heard myself and Richard Fox and Greg Heister many times on the regional games. Well, Santa Clara had a pretty good game that day. Gonzaga won, but I felt as a broadcaster just getting in, I had to call it straight down the middle. I don't want to be that homer guy that can't have other opportunities. I go to a Gonzaga practice 2 or 3 days later to prepare for the next one, and Coach Few beelines it to me sitting on the sideline. He goes, so what are you now? Are you like a Santa Clara Bronco fan? You don't like the Zags anymore? I mean, I'm not going to let you come to practice if you're going to talk about us like that. And I said, I had to look at Coach Few and I said, Coach, I have to call it straight down the middle. I'm not trying to throw Heister under the bus or anything, but I'm trying to grow a career and not be, all about Gonzaga. He goes, okay, I get it. I see how it is.
That's awesome. That is so Fewy, right? And not afraid to needle you and be a little pointed at times. But, to your point, broadcasting, when I did do that well back in the day now, and you and Richard and Heiser do such a great job, Dan. But that was an interesting perspective, right? To be able to have that behind the scenes look, go to practice, go to shoot arounds. And what was always interesting to me was seeing the other teams and what their walkthroughs and their shoot arounds look like. I will share with you, I remember going to Washington State with Tony Bennett. And those guys were so organized in the development and the ball skills that they were working on, even during shoot around. It was impressive. And then there's other programs that kind of roll through there, and you can just tell their preparation. If there's one thing Fitz taught us, was all about preparation, being organized, and we would know the plays as well as the other team. In fact, there was nothing better than telling a player where he should be going, the opposing player, when he was a little confused, right? Talk about, shaking his confidence a little bit. So watching the preparation and how Gonzaga develops kids, knows where every out of bounds play is going. It was always great as a broadcaster to kind of have that behind the scenes look.
Yeah. Jarrid, how about you guys had mentioned you guys kind of try to get your families together at every point during the year for a mini vacation. You guys also do a abandoned dunes trip, I believe, with a lot of your teammates. And by the way, thanks for the invite. At some point, I need to get down there with you guys. Who's the organizer of that, Jarrid? Is that you?
It kind of varies, Dan. Actually, we all just got back last weekend from Cabo. That was Matt Stanford and his wife organized that. But there's a group of about 6 of us from my year. I was the oldest, Dudley, and then the guys all from 94 that, I mean, these two yahoos were in my wedding. We're all in each other's weddings, and we've been doing this since before we had kids. We have photos of when all our kids were, 2-3 years old. So I will say it's unique. I remember, I'm still, you probably know him well, but I'm still pretty close friends with Eric Lautenbach. And I remember when Eric from Nike was our rep, and I remember him distinctly in the late 90s after we all graduated saying, look, I'm at every major program in the country, Duke, Michigan, you name it. What you guys have does not exist in the college environment. He's like, it is so unique. The fact that even we stay in touch with you and Floyd and Santangelo, I mean, that maybe the closest thing is Duke in terms of that culture. But I think that's the thing that Mark's really bred in that program is it's more than just, hey, you're just on the same team together, right?
Yeah.
He wants guys to be friends. Not everyone is that way. We get it. But my group certainly is remained incredibly tight over 30 years.
That's a great point. Eric Lautenbach has been an integral part of supporting and being a believer in Gonzaga throughout his whole time at Nike. And he has made similar comments to me when we've talked about just how special the groups kind of get together. I know when I came over from University of Washington, I had no idea. I had heard your guys' names, but I had no idea who you were. And within no time of me, during my redshirt year, Goss, I remember you coming in. I might have been for an alumni game or something. I don't even know who you are, and you're pitching me shit left and right, and I'm thinking like, I just met you 10 minutes ago. What the heck's going on?
So, hey, we're family.
I guess. So, Goss, tell me how you kind of have navigated helping that culture being translated from one era to the next, because I know for a fact if you were to walk into a gym today at GU and Nolan Hickman was there, you would probably make some comment to make him feel wanted, but also like, who the heck is this guy?
I don't know. I think that's just more of an inherited trait from the Goss side, but I don't know. I just always thought growing up, I always thought that was important because I was always a Vandal fan growing up, and it was innate with Don Munson and those guys. And I don't know. I just always felt that was really important to be as close as you can. Like as Jarrid said, not all teams are like that, but also to have a history. Because I always thought that was so important, moving forward. And it's just really nice being able to be, still, even the names is, someone that played at Gonzaga and have the ability to talk to all these guys and, see how they're doing and just make sure that how our class kind of started will always continue, because that's what we kind of preached. And that's what Few and Fitz and all those guys always said, hey, we're a family. And it kind of started back with, if you think like with Stockton and Steve DeLong and all those guys. I mean, they really, especially Steve-O set the tone for that. So I don't know. Maybe it's just a flaw in my personality, which I'm sure those guys will bounce on, but that's, I don't know. I don't know any other way.
I mean, Dan, a lot of people don't even realize this. I mean, I know it was before you, but that from Santangelo, Calvary, all of us, 6 of us were at every one of those games. None of us were making very much money. We were buying Southwest Airlines tickets. We were all in Seattle.
I was still in law school using my dad's credit card.
Yes, Texaco card. I remember when Casey tipped that in, they beat Florida. Literally, we all made it down to the floor, the 6 of us, and we went in the locker room after they won with Muntz. And I think, obviously Muntz and Few were our assistants, but I think some of those guys were looking at us like, who are these nut jobs and why are they in our locker room?
Yeah.
Well, that was the same thing we saw Munson in Minnesota when they beat Iowa. We busted into Minnesota locker room with Munson, and all of us were there high-fiving the guys and throwing water on these guys from Minnesota that just beat Iowa. And they're like, who are these clowns that have obviously had some beers? Why are they in our locker room?
You know, you look at the growth of the program, and there's been different steps. You know, that first, your guys' group made the postseason possible. John Riley's group got it to the NCAA tournament. Then all of a sudden that 99 team busts through, gets the Elite Eight. And then there's been little things over the course of time that has continued to move the program forward. But the ultimate goal being a Final Four and a national title. I know I saw you guys down in Phoenix in 2017 at that Final Four. How much joy did you guys have being a part of that?
It was one of the coolest moments.
We'll go Brown, Davis, and then Goss.
Yeah, Dan, I think we all have, that moment when we walked into the film before the South Carolina game. And there had to be, 75 former players there, right? All over the world, guys coming in from Australia. And being one of the first guys to walk in there, I distinctly remember Nigel standing up, right? We're there to support them, and they gave us the standing ovation.
Yeah.
And I think nothing says more about a program than that simple fact. Unfortunately, last year, COVID, it was so challenging to get there with if you did get there, you're up in the top. And so, there's certain things that give everyone joy in life, and watching Gonzaga play, win, but most importantly, win the right way, not have recruiting sanctions and all sorts of challenges that many of these top programs do, gives me personally a ton of joy. And I know it gives, the guys that we all played with a ton of joy. In the conversation now, right back in the day, in the mid-90s, you could literally walk into that lovely Safeway on Hamilton with a Gonzaga sweatshirt on, and they probably wouldn't recognize you. Now, if you say you went to Gonzaga and my God, you played there, and I always like to preference that, well, before we were any good, that from just a brand recognition is obviously much, much different and done amazing things for the school and the entire community.
Jarrid, how about you?
Yeah, I don't know, but I think all of us feel this way. I think we feel a part of it. And I think part of that is the consistency of Mark being there and Mark having that, hey, these guys all help build this program one way or another, brick by brick. And for the three of us, Brown's a little different. You obviously are different, Dan. You were All-American, played in the NBA. For us to be part of that, to go to a Final Four, I mean, let's be honest, not taking anything away from some of the guys, other teams in our league. But when we left, Gonzaga could have become University of Portland, right? The fact that it's done what Mark's been able to do with that program, and to Brown's point, we used to walk through the airports and be like, where's Gonzaga? I mean, they didn't even know it. And now you tell people you went there, you played, and it's like, there's just an immense amount of pride, I think, from probably our group that kind of feels like we were the first to sort of turn the corner maybe and start things, just to be a part of it. And I think that is probably why Goss feels that closeness. I mean, even for guys that we probably never met, we're like, hey man, we're Zags. I mean, I haven't met you, but we're Zags. And I think Mark has continued to try to impress that upon, his most recent teams as well. I know you probably feel it with the guys. I mean, I think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Goss?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. It's just that sense of, belonging, and at least for me personally, be able to show that, I could play with guys like Brown and Jarrid, who were so much more advanced than I was, but then to be able to have a significant contribution, at a short period of time there. But the main thing was, I think, especially in that 2017, was walking around and seeing all the alumni that we graduated with and all of our friends that were just such an integral part, as well as us playing, that just made Gonzaga what it is. And yeah, it's really a trickle down effect from what Few has done. But this net has been cast so wide now, and it is really nice to be able to say, like Jarrid just mentioned, that, hey, you played at Gonzaga versus, like, where the hell is Gonzaga? Oh, it's a small Division I school up in Spokane, Washington. Down they're like, oh my God, that's pretty amazing. And they kind of look at you funny, like, did you actually play? but it's a nice, yeah. What'd you say?
No, that's for Dudley.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry, team manager. No, but it's just that whole sense of, and that's what Few's always, I think, done, from back in the day, that just the fact that, hey, we are a group, and no one can get within that with that group, and it's just it's a nice feeling to have.
The growth of the program has been amazing. We've talked about a lot of different things, but the gear and the travel in the arena are absolutely first class. I was sorting through some things in my garage the other day, and I came across a picture. My red shirt year, I had hand-me-down sweats that I think were about 5 years old. Like, literally, they went about halfway to my sleeve. Give me your worst example of gear when you guys were there.
Oh.
Let's have Goss go first, because I think his interactions with Steve DeLong are legendary.
Well, we used to call Steve-O the shoe god, because I'd be in a panic every time I needed a new pair of shoes. But I think probably the worst one were our practice gear the first year, those little red tight shorts that Stockton probably still wears, God forbid. And I was terrified, because I wasn't the biggest guy in any sense of the imagination. And it was kind of in a panic having to practice in those tight little shorts. But the best was, though, my freshman year playing wise, we still had those little tight shorts, which I had to play in the University of Montana, which I didn't have a very good weekend. So we started passing those along, that a freshman guard had to wear those as a joke in warmups for a number of years. I remember in law school, we had Fromm wear those his first year, and that kid didn't even care. And they looked like duct tape around his ass and his front side. So it was, other than that, it was pretty limited. And the one thing real quick is, Jarrid mentioned Lautenbach, is I don't think people realize how close we were to going to LA Gear back in the day, because LA Gear came in hot and wanted Fitz, and they had signed USC, and then thank God Fitz and became buddies with Lautenbach, because that could have been drastically different right now.
Yeah, although I don't think the Nike gear during our era was that much advanced beyond LA Gear. Actually, Dan, you'll appreciate this with Coach Mike Burns. This is Goss with his Gonzaga practice shorts, giving him a little bit of closeout at Dudley's house. Our practice gear and gear was non-existent.
Jeff Brown, I know these guys are closer friends with you than I am with you, and they always give you a hard time on different things. Did you struggle to find practice gear?
No, he got whatever he wanted. I mean, he was having dinner every night at Fitz's house, and he got every new pair of shoes every single half second. He had no problems. Let me answer that for you.
I have a great story, Dan, about Jeff, because Jeff Brown and I played high school together. I knew he was going to be good even as a sophomore, and I don't even know how. My high school
you weren't
coach,
good.
No, I wasn't good. My high school coach said, "You're not good enough to ever play." But I was convinced of Jeff, and when he didn't like it at Washington, I called him, and he was very disgruntled, to the point where I had to call Myrna and Jim, his parents, and say, "Look, Jeff needs to come here. This redshirt group is good. He'll change the direction of this program." And I told Fitz he'd be a 3-year All-League player, which he was. Unfortunately, the first time he showed up for pickup ball, he had been horseback riding in the morning with his girlfriend. And we played hour and a half, and Goss and Dudley cornered me. And not that Brown, we all know, is not, the greatest rat ball player. And they said, "Dude, he's terrible. Are you kidding?" I was like, "Look, trust me, he's going to be fine."
And then Jarrid tried to justify it by saying, "Yeah, he was horseback riding." And I'm like, that doesn't make it any better. It actually makes it worse. I'm like, who is
First impressions are everything, aren't they, Dan?
Yeah,
I guess so. Yeah, I've had great first impressions with the three of you guys. I know you guys all have business commitments throughout the rest of the day, but one last question, just really quickly. Is Gonzaga going to win the national title? Yes or no? Jeff Brown, Davis, and Goss. Go.
Yes, I will preface that with they're young, Dan, and I would suspect them to have some challenges early versus last year's team, which is plug and play with 3 NBA guys, veteran guys. Now they're so young. I think they're certainly going to have stretches, especially early in the season when they're trying to figure out rotations. And what an awesome problem to have is so many dudes that can play, but that represents some challenges as well. So long-winded answer saying yes, although I think the journey will be perhaps a little bit Reagan.
Jarrid?
I mean, look, Dan, I'm not in the pontification business, right? You do this for a living and analyze these guys. I guess the short answer is I don't know, but I'm going to be pulling as hard as anyone for them. They obviously have the talent. I think you probably know as well as anyone, the NCAA tournament is a lot of luck involved, but I think Mark has put together a team that if they get hot, they absolutely have all the talent to be able to win it.
If they stay healthy and the fact they can go roughly 10 deep, I think they've got a really good chance to win this whole thing.
Awesome. Well,
yeah.
Goss, I like how you were still waffling on the fence. They've got a really good chance. So.
Dan, what's your perspective?
You know, I'm very similar to what you said, Jeff Brown. In fact, that I think they can and will win it all. There is so much more room for growth with this year's team than I've seen with any team that they've had, and simply because they've got the talent, but there's a lot of it's inexperience, but it's talented inexperience. Which, as long as they take coaching, they'll speed that learning curve up in no time. So, I really appreciate you guys. I know Gonzaga fans need to know more of your guys' stories because you guys were huge pieces of the foundation. So, thanks again for joining, and best of luck watching Gonzaga games with a lot of joy this year.
Awesome, Dan. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dan.